Vanishing hour. Jonah drove into the quiet, fog-laden town of Harper's Hollow just after midnight, exhausted from the long drive and recent events that had led him here. The darkness seemed thicker than normal, blanketing the streets and casting the town in an unsettling silence. He glanced around, seeing only a few dim lights from windows peeking through the mist, and he wondered if he'd made a mistake choosing this place for a fresh start. Jonah's new home was a small, weathered rental at the very edge of town. The house had an eerie charm, its wooden boards creaking and groaning in the wind, as though it held secrets within its walls. As he unpacked, there was a faint knock on the door, startling him. Standing on his doorstep was an elderly woman with a kindly but solemn expression. She introduced herself as Mrs. Alder, his neighbor from across the street. "Welcome to Harper's Hollow," she said, her eyes carrying an unusual sadness. "It's a quiet place, especially at night, but there's one thing you should remember. Never stay awake after 3 a.m. Her voice dropped to a whisper, and she glanced over her shoulder as if fearful of being overheard. "Strange things happen here in the early hours. I'd advise you to be asleep, safe in bed by then." Jonah thanked her, though he found her warning unsettling. Mrs. Alder left, disappearing into the mist, and Jonah brushed off the encounter, dismissing it as small-town superstition. He finished unpacking and settled in, convinced that the quiet solitude of Harper's Hollow would help him find the peace he so desperately sought. 3 nights later, Jonah stayed up late, absorbed in work. Midnight came and went, and the quiet of the town felt even heavier, pressing against the walls of his house. By the time 3 a.m. approached, he was the only light still on in the neighborhood. Ignoring Mrs. Alder's warning, he kept working, though he couldn't shake the eerie silence around him. Just as his clock ticked to 3:13 a.m., he blinked, and in that instant, the clock jumped forward an entire hour. It was suddenly 4:13 a.m., and he had no memory of the lost time. Confused and uneasy, Jonah tried to brush it off as a glitch, but a nagging sense of dread crept into his mind. The next morning, Jonah noticed something odd. Mrs. Alder's house door was left ajar, her usual morning lights absent. Curious, he went over, calling her name, but no one answered. On her doorstep lay a small carved wooden token bearing a strange symbol, a single eye surrounded by darkness. Jonah picked it up, and a shiver ran through him, as though the eye was staring straight into his soul. He realized Mrs. Alder was gone, vanished without a trace. Determined to understand what was happening, Jonah started asking questions around town, trying to unravel the mystery of Harper's Hollow. But the townsfolk were tight-lipped, offering only cryptic hints and cautious glances. Days passed, and every night at 3:13 a.m., Jonah would experience the same strange phenomenon, a missing hour, a period of lost time that left him feeling disoriented and uneasy. Through old records and whispered rumors, Jonah uncovered the town's dark past. Centuries ago, Harper's Hollow founders had accused a group of settlers of a heinous crime, and in a fit of mass hysteria, they'd sacrificed these innocents in a twisted ritual, hoping to protect the town from an unknown evil. But instead of granting them peace, the ritual had cursed Harper's Hollow, binding the spirits of the innocent to the town. Every night at 3:13 a.m., these spirits roamed, taking one resident each time as retribution for the sins of the town's founders. It dawned on Jonah that newcomers were often the target of this vanishing hour, and Mrs. Alder's warning had been a genuine attempt to protect him. Jonah realized he too was in danger. As he pieced the clues together, he made a disturbing discovery. His own ancestors had been among those who cast the original curse. Unbeknownst to him, his family had fled Harper's Hollow generations ago. Yet something had drawn him back, as though he were meant to be the final link in a centuries-old chain. One night, after another strange disappearance, Jonah found a new token outside his own door. His blood ran cold as he recognized his family crest carved onto the wood. He was being marked, chosen to face the curse his ancestors had left behind. Refusing to become another victim, he resolved to end the curse once and for all. As more people vanished, Jonah began collecting the tokens left behind. Each token bore a different symbol, representing fears and memories of those who had disappeared. He studied them, hoping they might reveal a path to lift the curse. though he couldn't shake the feeling that he was drawing closer to a dark fate. One stormy night at 3:13 a.m., Jonah decided to confront the spirits directly. As the clock struck, he stepped outside and was immediately surrounded by ghostly figures, the lost souls of Harper's Hollow vanished townsfolk. Their faces were twisted in agony, eyes wide with a mixture of terror and fury as they reached out for him, whispering his name in haunting voices. Among them, he spotted Mrs. Alder, her once kind face now skeletal, her voice a chilling hiss. "Free us or join us." Terrified, Jonah sought answers from the town's oldest resident, Elias, who had witnessed countless disappearances but had always kept his silence. Under Jonah's questioning, Elias revealed the town's darkest secret. They knew how to end the curse, but doing so would remove the town's supernatural protection, leaving Harper's Hollow exposed to an ancient, unspeakable force that lay dormant beneath its soil. The townspeople had sacrificed newcomers, like Jonah, to keep this force at bay. Elias handed Jonah a final token, his own name carved onto it, a choice. Jonah could sacrifice himself, becoming the last soul needed to end the vanishing hour, or he could leave, abandoning the town to its curse. But there was another layer to the choice. If he ended the curse, the spirits might exact a dark vengeance on the town. Desperate, Jonah gathered the tokens and headed to the hidden graveyard where the original sacrifices lay. There, surrounded by decayed symbols, he prepared to perform a ritual to break the curse, hoping it would release the spirits from their torment. As he chanted, the spirits surrounded him, their voices a haunting mixture of sorrow and rage. As the clock neared 3:13 a.m. one last time, Jonah realized a chilling truth. He was never meant to be free. From the moment he'd entered Harper's Hollow, he'd been marked as the curse's final victim, destined to join the ranks of the vanished. With no way out, Jonah completed the ritual, knowing it would seal his fate. In his last moments, Jonah accepted his place among the spirits, his scream echoing through the darkness as he became part of the vanishing hour. Days later, a new family moved into Jonah's old house, unaware of Harper's Hollow curse. On their doorstep lay a single token, carved with a familiar, watchful eye, waiting for the next hour to strike and the cycle to begin again. Thank you for joining me in the shadows. If you enjoyed the journey, please subscribe and share a Creepy Vault 45 with friends, because some chills are best when we're not alone.